If you have 10 friends and you get one friend, that's a 10% increase. If you have four people supporting you and you gain one, that's a 25% increase. But if you have nobody supporting you and you gain just one person who's supporting you, that is an infinite increase. It is infinitely better to have one person who supports you than zero. So that's why when I can, I try to be that one person for as many people as I can.
Welcome to the Power of PennWest. I'm your host, Dr. John Anderson, president of PennWest University. Whether you're a current student, a proud alum, or just curious about the PennWest community, welcome. Please stay tuned as we explore the stories, achievements, and experiences of the people who bring life to our campuses in California, Clarion, Edinboro, and online. Welcome to the Power of PennWest podcast. Today, we have the opportunity to talk to three fantastic faculty members. As you know, the power of PennWest is in its people. PennWest faculty members are renowned across all of our campuses and online for fostering a culture of exploration and engagement with significant contributions to student success both during and after their college experience. Faculty actively engage and encourage students to participate in diverse academic and extracurricular activities, promoting a well-rounded educational experience. Today, our three guests are no exception. We have three wonderful PennWest faculty members whose supportive environment not only enhances achievement, but prepares students for success in their careers and meaningful contributions to their communities when they're done. First, we have Dr. Karim Hossain, who teaches physics at the Edinboro campus. He is always exploring and presenting effective ways of improving instructional techniques. He started this after realizing that students in physics courses exhibited an anxiety that limited their motivation to learn. So Dr. Hossain, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure because we always stand in front of the student and it gives us a chance to go beyond that student. Hopefully, someone else will reach out to us and come to our campus or any of our campuses.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Dr. Hossain. Next is a professor of sociology at the California campus. Dr. Cody Stone promotes diversity and social inclusion in the classroom and emphasizes real-world experiences and authentic histories in courses and in content. Dr. Stone, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to actually get a chance to speak with you after seeing you in so many meetings.
Yes, looking forward to the conversation. Our third guest today is Dr. Brandon Packard, whose academic interests span from video games to artificial intelligence. He was recently recognized with a Special Equity Award for creating a welcoming environment where all students can thrive and feel safe. Dr. Packard, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to have been included in this.
Why don't each of you give us a brief introduction to how you chose to become a professor, someone who's going to commit their livelihood and their years of their career to helping students prepare for success when they're done. So what was your path to the professorship? Dr. Hossain, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you again. I remember when I'm originally from a country called Bangladesh. I came to the graduate school in Illinois, and as everybody else, I was a TA, and I began working as a TA. Then one of my professors said that, Kareem, I think I'm going to have you for my classes for the rest of the graduate year. You're going to be here. I said, any particular reason? I said, somehow or another, you sparked the student in his classes. And he said, down the road, if you wanted to change your major or something else, think about education. I was a laser physicist. So I said that, I'll think about it, that one. Then I finished my degree, worked in my graduate level work, and I thought, if my mentor thought teaching is one thing I could do, so maybe I should do that thing. Then I came to PennWest over here, and I did not, by that time, I just had a master's degree. I didn't have a PhD degree. So I came here again in Edinboro. Somehow or another, student tends to gravitate to me just because maybe I have an accent a little bit. Maybe I have a little humor in the class, or maybe I've been following Mr. Wizard. Some of my students do not know who Mr. Wizard is. Then I realize I am an old-fashioned man. Then when I tell them, I also know Bill Nye, the science guy, they said, okay, Bill, Bill, Bill. Then I said, you know what? I think I have something that I wanted to use it up. So I went to a graduate school PhD program in Buffalo, and there I was exploring all my optics and lasers. And one of my optics professors said that, you know what? Listening to you, I find it you really engage people. So why don't you go to the physics education, learn how to teach? I said, wow, that's something everybody's trying to tell me what to do. Why not I try it? So I've been working with a PhD on my physics education. I worked it out with a lot of study, like a PISA study. It's a study done in 17 or 67 countries, how physics should be taught and all those things. And I learned it with all other people. My mentor in the PhD also helped me to be. And that's where it came. I think it's important when you teach physics is to understand physics is a very hard subject. So instead of talking physics, I said, why not we make it fun? And that's where I came in. My budget always has been to buy any toys, any kind of tinkering things. And I've been known for that thing. I buy books, and you can see my office that always have a little tinkering things. And when I lecture my class, I start with a toy, pick it up and show to them. And then in somehow or another, I said, let's talk about this thing. And then the conversation goes on. And then we slowly, gradually get into that conversation, why this thing works and how it works. And that's what the beginning of my teaching.
Well, that is a great introduction. I think all of us want to come sit in your class now, get reintroduced to physics. Thank you. Dr. Stone, talk to us about your journey to the professorship.
I actually always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I just thought I was going to be a high school teacher because that was the highest level of education I had ever imagined or encountered growing up. I am a first generation college student. I grew up in a poor single mother with a disability household. And I spent a lot of my childhood loving school, mostly because it wasn't perfect and I didn't really have friends there, but nobody was hitting me there. So that was cool. So when I got to high school, I was like, all right, got to get out of this place. Not welcome here. So where should what can I do? And so for me, education has been my ticket to freedom. And so when I got to college and I met professors and I was like, whoa, wait, this is a possibility. One of my first advisors was a woman who had gone back to college at a community college in her 40s because she found out a little late she had married a drug addict and needed to get out of there, but had been raised in a really conservative home and she was told women don't have anything important to say. So after meeting her, I was like, this is the kind of person I want to be. I feel like I do belong here, and I've never felt that before in my life. So when I learned that being a professor was an option, that I could go to graduate school as just some poor rural nobody country bumpkin. It was just never, I got in trouble for reading books as a kid, was not encouraged. So being able to be in an area where I'm encouraged to read, think, write down my thoughts, talk about them with other people, that blew my mind. So when I had an opportunity, just like Frederick Douglass said, when I got an inch, I took an eel, and I went as far as I could. And that ended up having to go to, I went to graduate school at Western Michigan University, which was the alma mater of one of my advisors. And I had the extreme privilege to be a teaching assistant during my master's program and during my PhD. So I got an opportunity to get paid to do this thing that I loved. And I was like, this is a dream. What? I mean, it was a very difficult dream at times. I didn't have money. My friends are all like getting real jobs and traveling, and I'm reading a million books and, doing some things that, working extra jobs and doing all the things that I needed to do to pay the rent and pay for books. But I feel really honored that I had that opportunity because it gave me the option of now being in a position where I'm at PennWest and I have the ability to pay some of that forward. And it's one of the reasons that I really enjoy being at this university in particular. It reminds me a lot of my alma mater, which was a small school in Ohio. And it was one of the reasons that I wanted to be here in particular. So providing that opportunity for more rural students from all over, that you don't have to fit into a particular mold to be not even an academic, just to think and to have your thoughts taken seriously and to learn the same things that I was listening to a previous podcast of yours, Dr. Anderson, of this, and you were talking about the opportunity for education as something that used to be only for the high class. And learning that and learning about the history of slavery in the United States and all that kind of stuff really made me understand the power of education. And so I want to make sure that any student that I interact with understands that they are not just going to college to get a degree, to get a job. They're coming here to learn lifelong skills and learn what their power is. And so that's something that I really try to focus on in any of the classes that I teach.
That is excellent. Dr. Stone, thank you so much for sharing that personal journey with us. Dr. Packard, how about you?
So I grew up my entire life playing video games. And I got to high school and I had to start to, think about college and my career. And I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I really liked computers and I wasn't very fond of people. So when I went to apply, I applied for computer science, quote, because it has the word computer in it. Had no idea what it was. And as I was going through and getting to the point where, now I have to think about post-graduation, again, I had no idea. I ended up tutoring one of my friends in, I believe it was our data structures class. She was somewhere around like a D, close to the line to failing. So I worked with her, and at the end of the term, she basically came up to me, said that her grade raised from a D to, I think it was a low B, and gave me a hug. And that was the first time I was ever like, that actually felt kind of good. So almost on a whim, if you will, I signed up for grad school to avoid the real world. And then while I was at grad school, I was a TA for 5 years, and by the time I came out of grad school, it was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like being in education, helping students, that tiny little spark kind of grew into a towering inferno by then. Now I say that to me, I'm one of the luckiest people in the world because every day I get to wake up and go to a job where I can just be myself. And there's so much to be said for that. That's kind of my path up through, not really like almost into the contrast to, oh, I knew I wanted to be a teacher my whole life. I kind of had no idea what I wanted to do and just followed things that sounded interesting until they led me to where I am now.
I think isn't that true for most of us? Little conversations here and there, a little nudge here and there can push us to where we end up. These stories are so great. I wish we could take these 3 stories to every junior and senior across Western Pennsylvania. To say all of us who work in the classroom, work in administration, we came from very normal backgrounds. I remember as an 18-year-old walking in, sitting in my first college class thinking, wow, this faculty member knows everything. They must have had a background that I didn't have. And slowly that gap starts to close as you get to know people. And so thank you to each of you for being willing to share your stories about how you became who you are and how you decided to do what you do. We'll be right back after this message.
At PennWest University, we're making college make sense again for people who maybe thought college wasn't the answer. We're making college practical with programs tied to in-demand jobs that prepare you for success right away. We're making college accessible by breaking down barriers and offering more choices. We're making college approachable with faculty who understand where you're coming from and help you get where you're going. At PennWest, we're making college valuable again for people just like you. Learn more at pennwest.edu.
if each of you could think back about the opposite end, and then because each of you shared great examples of people who gave you encouragement, prodded you a little bit. Have you had the chance to do that on the opposite side? Have you had a student come to you and say, I'm thinking about this, I'm struggling with that, and then they all of a sudden the light bulb turns on, the bells start to ring, and they think, oh, I want to do what you're doing. Have you had that conversation with students? Dr. Hussein, have you had any students go on to graduate school?
When I was undergraduate student, students have a reluctant to come to physics. So first thing I had to do, my mentor told me, make them relax them. So what I do even now, even then and now, I do a lot of games, something. First thing what I do, even nowadays, I do, if you may give me opportunity to talk to my overall whole teaching life. In my first day of class, I always, whenever I talk to them, I do a small talk. Give them a chance to tell their side of story. Students has a lot of things to say and they want us to hear them. But most of us, we tend to overtake their talk. So I give them a talk to share whatever they have to share with me. And once soon they do, then they say that, and they always tells me something. I always tell this thing to them. I'm glad you shared with me, or I hear you, I understand you. When I do this kind of answer, they said, you know what? Someone else is also listening to me. And once I listen to them, and then that's where the conversation started. And I do something in my whole life. I like to introduce myself as my first name, Karim. And I also tell them the same thing. Please, hopefully, you will also give me the opportunity to call you by your first name. Calling each other by first name, I think we are in the same boat. We can talk to each other, share our stories. And that, I think, breaks the initial break that they have about us. And I remember just this semester it's also a student, it's an online student. For my online students, I had to put some videos, first day class, like I catch them on the first page of the book. And that person, without me knowing her or her knowing me, she wrote a whole email about how she was inspired to be a teacher. She's a biomedical or bio field. She said, once I come to the finish my degree, I want to follow your footstep to become a teacher. I think for us, having an apple in the table, it means and so wonderful to have somebody appreciate about small things we do for them.
That's a great story. Thank you. Dr. Stone?
Yeah, my professors in undergrad were instrumental in, I mean, in many ways, keeping me alive. Sometimes they literally gave me food when I didn't have food, or a place to stay when I needed a place to stay. And that is the kind of support. I mean, not directly, but I want to make sure that I provide those kinds of opportunities for my students in the classroom to learn. Here's a practical skill. So I do a lot of projects in my classes where I say, what is your major? How does this information apply to what you want to do? Because I don't have a ton of people who necessarily are going to go to graduate school for sociology. I wish more would. However, I think sociology is such a wonderful background degree for any kind of graduate program that one goes into. So I try to get students to think about, how do you apply this to your either personal or professional life? Some of my students are probably so sick of hearing that phrase because I say it at every class, and I often have students who will take multiple classes with me. And that's one of the things that, like Kareem said, I encourage my students to call me by my first name. I want them to know that everything that, one, that I'm not perfect. I make a ton of mistakes. I try to be vulnerable in front of them, and I try to learn from them as much as possible. And I've definitely had moments throughout my teaching career when One time I had a business student who was a senior who took an intro to sociology class with me. And I did oral exams at the end for anybody who had an A. They had the option to either write a final paper or answer a few questions in a face to face conversation with me. And I had this senior business major who said, I've never had a professor ask me my opinion on something like this, like you do in this class. And I just really appreciated that. That was such a feeling of, like Kareem said, this student feels seen and heard, and having that opportunity to open up and share, even if you're not necessarily going to be a sociologist for the rest of your life, if you can learn those critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, how to understand social research and things that you see on the news, those are lifelong skills. So it's really great when students, no matter where they're at in their college career or their what major they are, that they're getting that opportunity to explore and learn and think about things that maybe they've never been able to think about or never been asked about. Since I've been at PennWest, I've had the opportunity to stay in touch with several former students who were sociology majors and went to school for social work or went to graduate school for counseling education, political science, right? There's a lot of different kinds of things that people have gone into. And it's just amazing to see when they do come back and they say, or they'll send me an email or something, reach out, here's how I'm doing, here's what I'm up to. It's just really gratifying. And like Kareem said, it may not be a physical apple on your desk, but it definitely makes me feel like I'm doing something that matters. And that's always been really important for me, to have a career that I feel like I'm making a difference. And I really do feel that here.
That's a great perspective. And I love the way you talked about sociology as being something that shapes people's perspectives no matter what they do. And I'm proud of that as someone who holds an undergraduate degree in sociology. And I still, believe it or not, I still have my notes from my undergraduate sociology courses. That's where
I
I was
love that.
introduced into what a theory-based decision is. That's where I
Yes.
understood how you put together and frame an argument and how you understand someone else's perspective, whether or not you agree with it. And I still go back to those notes. I still reflect back on exchange theory,
Oh, yeah.
institutionalism, all those basic theories that we learn in sociology. And that has been so transformational for me in my career. It has helped me
Amazing.
tremendously.
Love hearing that. Hey, anytime you want to sit in on a social class, just if you feel that itch, come on by. I'm here Tuesday, Thursdays this semester.
You can count on it. I'd love to do that. Dr. Packer, let's hear from you. Tell us some stories you've shared with students or how you've helped them.
One of the ones that comes to mind is when I was a student, of course, my professors were very instrumental. I do, of course, have my PhD in computer science, but I also have a bachelor in philosophy. So I got variety of professors, variety of viewpoints. Well, now I have a policy that if I'm at my office, which I'm at my office a lot, and I'm not doing like a meeting or something, my door's always open. And whether people need help, whether they just need to come and chat, whatever. One of the ones that sticks out to me that's somewhat recent, we don't have a lot of people go to grad school, but we do have some. And one of students came to me and said that basically was considering a PhD, but wasn't sure if he'd be able to do it. And I've always known him to be, a good student, a hard worker. He's a smart young man, which makes me sound too old. But so I kind of talked to him like, well, why don't you think you can do it? And long story short, it sounds like he went to basically like a STEM prep sort of high school, where they had to take a lot of math, a lot of chemistry, that sort of thing. And apparently his teachers there told him he would be lucky to get through undergrad and don't even think about going higher than that. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, that's bullcrap. I'm like, you're a good student, and I'm like, I know you can do it. I said, and I think you can do it too. But he just is in the situation where So many people throughout his, high school experience told him that he couldn't do it, that he started telling himself he couldn't do it. And the last time that I talked to him about it, which I believe was the end of last term, he was looking into how to take the GREs, when does he apply, and he's pretty much gone full in on it. He's also trying to convince some of my other students that they should go to grad school with him. I know sometimes I think people just need someone who believes in them. One thing I was told once, which is mathematically a little dubious, but I really like, is if you have 10 friends and you get one friend, that's a 10% increase. If you have four people supporting you and you gain one, that's a 25% increase. But if you have nobody supporting you and you gain just one person who's supporting you, that is an infinite increase. It is infinitely better to have one person who supports you than zero. So that's why when I can, I try to be that one person for as many people as I can.
That is well said, Dr. Packard. Thank you. And I wonder, we've got over 500 faculty members and people who will enter the classroom as leaders of a learning experience each semester. And I'm grateful to be an institution that values those kinds of conversations that you just described. And the ability to find that one person who may be struggling, who may be on the edge, who may be questioning their ability to succeed, and to pull them aside and say, you can do it. Just hang in there. Study a little more. Reading's good. Keep working on it. We'll make it through this together. Thank you for being that person and sharing that story. Let's go down this path for just a minute. I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand. So let's assume that your department chair comes to you and says, I want you to teach this course you've never taught before, whatever that subject is, upper level, lower level, GE course. And you sit down at the computer, you open up a blank Word document, Google Doc, and you sit back and say, okay, how are we going to do this? Where do you start in preparing a class like that? Dr. Hossain, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think I have a good experience about that. When I came to PennWest Edinboro, I feel like I could try everything. So one of our faculty retired. He was teaching digital electronics. I figured, well, surely I would like to do that thing. So what happened is, one semester I sat in his class like a regular student just to see how a student feels it. And I did. And remember, this is my field, may not be 100%, but I wanted to. So I sat down in that class, did everything like every other student, took the every test I could do, learned from it. So while I'm doing it, and I said, you know what? If you have to do it, might as well put your 200% into that one. So I started getting 200%, reading book, researching it, every possible book I have. I could do all the labs and every possible things. I started doing it. And then I was taking like if look, those nerdy student taking every notes, every things I can possibly do. The next semester, I sat through his class again just to make sure I'm learning it every possible way. In the meantime, I'm also getting my background check on it. And the third semester, I asked his permission that can I do it? He said, you've been taking the test, you're doing the labs, why don't you do that thing too? And honestly, I taught that course for many times, not just digital electronics. I'm a very proud that one of my students was in that class, and that student went to Washington University, and his group become one of the Nobel Prize, and so his group was one of them. So later on, he wrote me a letter to me that Kareem, remember the digital class he taught me? And that digital class, I'm still using it. And I had to tell him that, yes, it was put into me, and I'm glad I took the opportunity to learn, and I'm glad you found something out of it. I'm very proud of it because When you learn something from some mentor, it helps you to guide it and also helps you to learn something more beyond it. I hope I try to do that thing more often. Thank you.
What a fantastic story. And that stewardship of sitting there staring at the blank page, thinking, how are we going to create a learning environment where students are going to thrive and want to come back every class period for 15 weeks and want to learn and want to engage? How do you create that, Dr. Stone?
I had the opportunity to take a class from a early education professor at my alma mater, and it was about queer theory and education. And it had a bunch of students that were teaching K through 12 classes, and she basically needed me to take it to so it would run. And since that was queer theory was in my research area, I was like, sounds like a great opportunity to learn about education, which getting a PhD in sociology, you don't get taught how to teach very often. So I took that opportunity up, and it was amazing. It totally changed my approach to how I construct my classes. And as I've taught over the years, I continuously tweak. I continuously go to conferences and I attend teaching sessions because I want to know, hey, what are my colleagues doing that's working? What have they tried that really hasn't worked? What do I think would benefit my students best? And those kinds of things. So I've been constantly tweaking, but since I've been at PennWest, I've had the opportunity to create like 14 different classes I'd never taught before. Just this semester, I'm teaching race and ethnic relations and research methods, which are both brand new classes. But I haven't had the opportunity to sit through other people teaching those classes like Karim talked about. So what I did was I got on the internet and I looked up other examples of syllabi. And I look up a lot of like, what are some of the projects that people are using in their classes? What are some of the common readings and those kinds of things? And then I also look at what my students are, if I know, like, hey, I'm teaching research methods and there's going to be a lot of social work students in this class. Well, I'm looking up specific course materials because I often will just find like freely available course materials for my students. And I'll look that information up and say, all right, I got research methods that is particularly geared towards social workers as one of my course materials. So how can I incorporate this and make it something that is going to be useful for students regardless of their major? So it's a lot of trial and error and tweaking over time to get to, when I teach intro to social now, I've taught that a million times. It's not a problem. But those new classes, like I just got assigned a deaf and dying class. So I also do it since I teach sociology. I also tend to be on the lookout in my day-to-day life. Like I just went and got coffee the other day and there was a flyer asking for volunteers at a local hospice. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm teaching deaf and dying. Maybe I should go check this out over the summer and we'll see what happens. So try to do those like real world experiences coupled with that internet research and talking with colleagues as well about what they've found that's worked or hasn't worked.
That's excellent. Dr. Packard?
When prepping, and I've, had a lot of new preps so far, I guess I would call it a top-down approach, where I look at what are the prereqs for this course and what did they learn, and then what does, the official syllabus and description say that we have to learn, and where can we kind of go from there? And then I have these sticky notes that we get in that I have ordered way too many of because I leave them everywhere. But they're like a bigger sticky note with lines on them. And then the next thing that I will always do when creating a course is make the schedule. So what are we talking about every week? Where are the exams? Where are the assignments? Because once I have the schedule and the roadmap of, how do I get them from the start to the end, then I break it down into the PowerPoints, the assignments, if we have any worksheets or anything like that. Nothing against anyone else, but due to me and the way I like to teach and my raging anxiety at times, I basically make all of the materials for courses myself. So all of the PowerPoints, all of the assignments, everything is from my own mind, as scary as that might be, with inspiration from looking around. And then I think that makes me a more effective instructor because any question that a student has on any of the material, I wrote it. So there's not a matter of, oh, I don't know what this question is asking because I wrote the question. I know what the question's asking most of the time. Sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between prepping Brandon and lecturing Brandon, but we get through it together. For me, it's just that kind of start from the high level and drill down until you have something that meets that overall goal that I think is really important for the way I teach at least. And it's not that the plan can never change. I do try to be flexible. I have two students in my class. We call them the twins because they are identical twins, and I think they enjoy being identical twins more than I enjoy anything in my entire life. But in my class last term, they started a mistake counter on the board of every time that I had a typo in the slides or every time that I basically just made some sort of minor mistake in class. And I think at the end of the class it was like 70 and they have all the tally marks up on the board, and this term they're actually keeping track because I'm teaching. They're in both Python and assembly, and they're keeping track of whether I say the word Python or the word assembly more during this term. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I do, and you are in a position of authority over the students, but at the same time, you're human. Like I've told my students before, I would not say I'm a more naturally gifted programmer than you. I've been programming for 13 years. You've been programming for 2 months. Yes, I'm better at it than you, but that's because I've been doing it for, however many times longer. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
What a great story. And I know those two twins. I saw them again at a lunch the other day in the cafeteria, and I can see them doing that, keeping their tick marks, making sure they remind you what you're saying and how you're saying it. Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining us today on the Power of PennWest podcast. It was really interesting to hear how you became a professor, what led to that decision, other people you've helped as they decided their career trajectory, and something a lot of students don't understand, and that is how a class is created. I think a lot of us don't really take the time to sit back and think about the work that has gone in to creating an environment that a student can walk in a class, receive a syllabus, either paper or electronic, and have a creative learning experience prepared for them to engage in. And I want to thank the three of you for being the faculty members that you are and strengthening PennWest in the ways that you do. So thanks to each of you for taking time to join us today. This will be heard by a lot of people, and they'll get to share the experiences that I got to hear about you and about what you've added here to the PennWest classroom experience. So Dr. Packer, Dr. Stone, and Dr. Hossain, or Karim, Cody, and Brandon, if I could.
Yes,
Thank you
please.
so much for taking time this morning. It's great to see all of you. And to those listening, thank you for joining in to the Power of PennWest podcast.